harassment. As we continue with 11 Alive's coverage of the trial of Andrea Sneiderman.
We're ready to continue. Kelly, we're back on the record. Mr. Morgan, you ready to proceed, sir?
Thank you, Judge.
You're quite welcome.
Mrs. Citron, you have had a chance to review your testimony from the Newman trial, is that correct? And in the question...
Ms. Citron, you have to answer yes or no because
Yes.
the court report has to hear your response.
Yes.
And again, you were asked in that case, as you were in this case, about what Andrea said in regards to whether or not she was interested in Mr. Newman if she was not married. Is that right?
Correct.
And after having refreshed your memory with that transcript, do you recall what you said?
Maybe if she was not married, she would have been interested. However, she loved her husband and was not interested.
So your testimony...
That is what she said. But I could also tell she was lying.
Objection, Your Honor.
Yes, sir. What's the objection?
Yeah. Objection, she cannot state her opinion as to whether or not a witness was not telling the truth. It was not responsive to the...
All right. I will sustain the objection and have it removed. That last response was non-responsive to your question. Next question, Mr. Morgan.
Thank you, Judge. Andrea told you about it, that her boss had professed his love to her, right?
Yes.
Did she ever say that she professed her love back to her boss?
No, I was more focused on what was going on with her and Rusty, so we immediately got back to Rusty.
Did she tell you she had any romantic feelings for her boss?
Again, if she had not been married, I asked her if she thought he was good looking. She said he's dark and professional. But romantic feelings, I don't recall that now.
Did she tell you she had any type of sexual relations with her boss?
No, but what did happen is I asked her point blank if something had already happened between her and her boss. And I could tell that she was lying to me when she said no.
One second. Hold on. We're going to have some control. Ms. Citron, what I need you to do, you can explain answers if they need to be explained, but I need you to listen to the lawyer, respond to his question. All right. Next question.
Okay. Ms. Citron, I'll tell you, your subjective belief of what you thought is not what I'm asking.
Objection,
What?
Your Honor. I would ask that counsel ask questions.
I'm going to sustain that objection, Mr. Morgan. I will direct that you ask a question, and she will respond.
What did she say? Yes or no?
I'm sorry, will you repeat the first question?
You asked her whether had anything already happened. What did she say? Yes or no?
After hesitating and looking away from me, she said no.
Okay. And you were someone that y'all shared the most intimate details of your sex lives with one another, right?
She has never told me anything about her sex life with Rusty.
You were asked in the interview with Detective Thompson about Andrea's morals and ethics. Is that right?
About her morals and ethics?
Morals and ethics.
I don't recall, but maybe you'll refresh my memory? Okay.
Do you recall what you said when asked about Andrea's morals and ethics?
And I object, Your Honor. I believe her answer was, I don't recall whether or not the detective asked.
Okay. I didn't hear her response because her voice was feigning a little bit. I couldn't hear the response. You may be correct, Ms. Hill. I'm not saying you're not. Let me just do this. Ma'am, if you could, I'm having some difficulty hearing some of your responses.
Okay.
Can you just give that last response on the record because I couldn't hear it?
Okay. Would you go ahead and say what you were asked?
If you don't remember, that's fine. But do you recall being asked a question about Andrea's morals and ethics and your opinion of those?
I don't recall, but maybe you could refresh my memory, is what I said.
If you don't recall, that's fine.
Okay.
Do you recall, go ahead, do you recall saying that Andrea had high morals and ethics and you did not...
Objection, Your Honor. I think she just said she didn't recall.
Well, I'm trying to refresh your memory. She asked me
Well,
to.
that's not the proper way to refresh her memory.
All right, lawyers. Let me do this. I'm going to listen to everyone.
Yes, Judge.
I'm going to listen to the objections, no matter how loud they are to me.
Yes, Judge.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to overrule that objection. I will allow Mr. Morgan to ask a question. She's on cross, and I will give him an opportunity to ask whatever question. If you think it's inappropriate, you may make an objection.
Yes, Judge.
You may ask your question.
you recall telling Detective Thompson that you believe Andrea had high morals and ethics and would not have an affair. On January 21st, 2000.
Well, let her answer the question, Ms. Moore.
Did you say that?
Well, I know I was certainly hoping that.
Did you recall saying that? Answer
Are you
yes or
go-
no.
Are you going to let me expound, or do I just
No,
have to say
you
yes
can
or no?
certainly say yes
hold
or
on,
no.
hold on, Lori. Ms. Boyd, excuse me. You may answer yes or no. You can explain your answer
Okay.
if it needs to be explained. So answer his question, and then you may explain.
Okay. Yes.
You do remember it now.
In the months after Rusty's murder, I wanted to believe everything that Andrea told me. I tried to believe everything that she was telling me.
Now, this conversation on January 21st was after the September 1st meeting at Fuddruckers, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to say yes or no.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
The Halloween party. That was an annual occasion that Rusty and Andrea hosted, is that right?
No. My parents hosted it.
Okay, they were there.
They were there, yes.
And lots of children.
Yes.
And at that time, Sophia and Ian would have been 5 and 2, is that right? Your kids were there?
Yes, her kids were there.
And all the grown-ups and all the children in the costumes?
Yeah. Just
Approximately how many people?
Oh my gosh. At my parents' house, we maybe had 5 families. I don't recall.
5 families with children?
Mm-hmm.
And Rusty and Ian were dressed as Scooby-Doo characters.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Rusty said he had to dress like Fred to save his marriage, to dress like a cartoon character.
Mm-hmm.
And you said there was tension at the Halloween party with children? Or tension between Rusty and Andrea? Is that what you testified?
They were not talking a whole lot, the two of them, that I saw.
Okay. They're a couple with a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old at a Halloween party, and they're not talking a lot.
I was
Did that
talking.
shock you? You and your husband were there?
Yes.
And your 2 children?
Mm-hmm.
And how old were they?
My children, since 2010. My son right now is 8.5, almost 9, and my daughter's turning 6. So
How many other people were there at the party?
a lot of people, but there always were a lot of people.
And Rusty is in the boat taking people out on rides.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe the boat? Is it a pontoon boat, a ski boat?
Like a ski boat.
The ski boat could hold 6 people. Do you remember it's inboard, outboard, whether you could sit on the back or whether it had a motor?
It was an outboard.
Okay. And so there's a limited number of people who could ride on the boat at any given time.
That's right, just like always, to be honest.
And there's a house there where Andrea was.
Mm-hmm.
Rusty's out giving people rides.
Mm-hmm. As always.
And
However,
where
the
were
timing,
Sophia?
it was the timing that was different. Yes, it was always shuffling. I know where you're going. You're asking me, were they always shuffling people and switching people and so forth? Yes, of course, but it was always like that. But he always waited till the end of the party. My thoughts on that as to why he waited to the end of the party in previous years was potentially a gas situation. Maybe it was because he didn't like the boat getting messed up. Everyone had to take off their shoes, etc. But on this particular instant, it was notably different. So much so that he did not want to even pull the boat in to speak with Andrea when Andrea was trying to tell him that my family needed a life jacket. So much so that I dove into the water to swim out to the boat to get the life jacket. The situation was much different between the two of them that day versus other birthday parties.
Because he was taking people out on the lake all day long.
Rusty was the kind of guy that was always happy, always had the biggest smile on his face, and that day, it was different.
Did you?
It was different.
Let her finish. Still trying to need a break. It's okay if you need a break. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to take a break. Step into the jury room. We're going to take a few-minute break. All rise.
All right, the judge is taking a break. This coverage of the trial of Andrea Sneiderman and Shana Citron has been on the stand over the last 90 minutes. This is our second break that we have had. Judge Adams stepping away from the bench now and Ms. Citron remaining in the witness chair. It has been a very emotional rendering for her this morning, talking about Rusty Sneiderman at a party on Lake Oconee, and that Rusty was in a much different mood than what she had been accustomed to seeing him in.
That's what she says. I note she's sitting in the chair, not even getting up to take a break, composing herself, so apparently this is having a lot of impact on her.
What do you make of that, of just sitting there? Do you see witnesses that do that?
Usually the prosecution goes up and hands them a tissue.
It's your duty to discuss the case in order to reach
It's kind of interesting. They're just all leaving her alone and letting her sit there and compose herself. But it may be because she doesn't want to get up and have to walk past the Sneiderman family.
We are taking a look at Andrea Sneiderman, who is smiling and engaging some of her friends and family with her back to Shana Citron. And
Sending out tweets, it looks like, from her cell phone just a moment ago.
oftentimes in these trials like this, they are defined by what is said, but in this unusual case where there's so much emotion and so many sidebars, what is not being said right now seems to speak quite loudly.
It does. A lot of times things that you can't see on TV, but if you're in the courtroom you can just feel it. This may be a very powerful moment for the prosecution, actually. The defense is trying to score points, but Ms. Citron's so emotional that I'm not sure how far the defense is getting right now.
Can you talk a little bit about the prosecution's lilt through all of this? I mean, we're hearing some objections to the line of questioning from J. Tom Morgan, but aside from that, this is their period to sort of sit by and to assess the words from Shana Citron.
From a strategic standpoint, one of the things you don't want to do as a prosecutor is rescue your witness too much. If it's going over the top, you'll object, but you just have to let them get the brunt of it sometimes, and you prepare them for that ahead of time. That's part of the
It's kind of
pre-trial
like a
prep.
bullfighter, right? Just getting out of the way.
You just sometimes you just got to let them take whatever's going to happen to them. Ms. Citron certainly knew that she was going to get grilled by the defense, and she's dealing with it the best she can, apparently, and the prosecution, to their credit, is just sitting back and saying, let it happen, and that's all you can do.
We want to encourage you to submit questions for Kelly Burke, former district attorney from Houston County and practicing lawyer. If you have any questions for him, feel free to submit them to me via email, jhullinger, Hullinger, at 11alive.com. Or you can also reach out via Twitter, and that is at 11Hullinger. And one woman from Florida said, you know, Jeff, when you give out those addresses, please do them much slower. So I will slow down again, at 11Hullinger, Hullinger.
Or listen faster.
Yeah. Too many years covering sporting events where the action goes by very quickly, and if you don't speak quickly, you'll miss out. But we're certainly not missing out on our coverage here, as we will stay with you through the duration of the trial. And Judge Gregory A. Adams back on the bench, and we resume with Shana Citron.
Ms. Citron, are you ready to continue? Okay. Mr. Morgan, are you ready to continue?
Yes, Judge.
Where's my court report? Okay. Let me get my court report. All right, Kelly, I was looking for you. We're good. No problem, we're good. And Ms. Citron, are you ready to continue? All right. I just need you have to answer the lawyer's questions. All right. Bring them in.
Every time I'm moving your water because it's directly in mine. You can get it. I gave it April from it.
Come on in, ladies and gentlemen, make yourself comfortable. Come on in, ladies and gentlemen, make yourself comfortable. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your patience. Come on in, ladies and gentlemen, make yourself comfortable. Technically, you can be seated in any seat. There are technically no assigned seats. I know we're all creatures of habit. We want to sit in the same seat, but you can sit anywhere you want to sit. So come on in, just make yourself comfortable. Come on in, ladies and gentlemen, make yourself comfortable. Come on in, ladies and gentlemen, make yourself comfortable. I always tell ladies and gentlemen, if you want to sit on this end, come out first. Sit on that end, come out second. That way you don't have to climb over anyone. But you can sit in any seat. Just make yourself comfortable. Ladies and gentlemen, every now and then I got to take a break, but don't draw any emphasis from any breaks that I take, one way or the other. All right. Y'all can be seated. Ms. Morgan, you can be seated.
Mr. Citron, again, going back to your previous testimony, you said, were you able to observe Rusty that entire day? Were you in the boat with him?
The entire day, no.
And there were other common friends of yours and Andrea's at the birthday party, right?
Yes.
And Andrea Lippman was there and can make the same observations as you, right?
Objection as to what Andrea Lippman could make.
I'm going to sustain that objection. You may want to rephrase that question.
Was Andrea Lippman present? Did you recall her being?
I do not recall. It is possible, of course. I'm sure she was there. I do not recall meeting her until after Rusty was murdered. It's very possible we met, but I do not recall that. It's very possible, though.
Well, you're going back to the 18th, and I may have misunderstood. You testified under direct examination that you were in the car when you received the phone call.
That is correct.
And you were using your GPS.
That is correct.
Have you told anyone else that you were in the spot when you received the phone call?
Yes.
Could you be both places at once, in the car and in the spot?
I'm sorry, on the spot? I'm sorry, will you?
Have you told anyone else that when you received the phone call from Andrea that you were not in the car, but you were actually inside the spot?
Oh, no. No. Now, be clear. When I first received the phone call from Andrea Sneiderman, I was in the car. I then later received a phone call from Andrea Lippman from Andrea's phone, I believe. But I did not speak to Andrea Sneiderman at all that day until getting to her house that night. It was Andrea Lippman who told me that Rusty had been killed.
Okay.
And I had never met her before, or I certainly do not recall meeting her, and she was the one who told me while I was at the spa that Rusty had in fact died.
So, but Andrea Sneiderman called you while you were in the car?
Andrea Sneiderman called me while in the car and told me that he had been shot. It was Andrea Lippman who told me that in fact he had died.
Okay. The conversation that you had with Andrea Sneiderman about her phone call with him, do you
Yes.
recall when that was?
No, I really do not. The exact day, is that what you're asking me?
Okay. Was it before or after her trip to Florida?
I'm sure it was before.
And why are you sure?
Why am I sure? Because I recall being in my kitchen. I recall being at the exact point where I was in my kitchen during the phone call conversation after she got back from Florida. I don't think I saw her until maybe a day after she got back from Florida, or something similar to a day, maybe 2 days after Florida. I was at her house after speaking. I was at her house while speaking with her after she returned from Florida. This was a phone call conversation.
Okay. You don't have any recollection of the day, so we can check the phone records, is that right? You don't know approximately when this was? The phone call that you said she told you about, she had called him.
Correct. I have not checked my phone records.
Was it during the meeting the two of you had together after her trip to Florida where she told you about the sketch list like Kimmy's house?
I'm sure it was.
Okay. And her trip to Florida was to celebrate her anniversary.
Yes.
You recall when her anniversary was?
The 30th of December.
And you said it was a couple of days after she got back.
Or a day. Could have been the 31st. I don't recall.
Do you remember it was on New Year's Eve?
Honestly, I do not recall. I remember we were supposed to have a party at our house and we canceled it because of Rusty's death.
But there was that conversation, and that was the first time she told you the sketch looked like Kimmy's eyes. Is that correct?
I think that's yes. However, there were discussions about the sketch previously to that.
She also told you about the email she had received from Kimmy with an attachment, correct?
At that same meeting, yes.
That was the same meeting that she told you. And it was at that meeting that she said she suspected you.
It was at that meeting that she suspected me? No. She told me on the phone previous to that she called him to ask him if he had anything to do with it. And then she showed me an email from him
All right. And
about that.
And the email was after the 28th.
There's two separate emails that she showed me.
Okay. Did you show those to the police? Did you tell the police about them?
I had not. Did I? What?
Okay. Well, let's deal with those emails. We're bringing them up now. Let's talk about it. Did she show you an email from Kimmy
Yes, two.
regarding the murder?
One said, I did not, or no, I didn't, or something like that.
That was an email.
That was an email.
And she showed you that.
Yes, she did, on her phone.
Tell the state that.
I don't know. Did
You
they
didn't think
ask?
that was important?
I don't know. Did they ask me that?
Oh, they had to ask you first?
I don't know. I told,
Miss,
oh, no,
Go ahead.
no.
go ahead. You can explain.
I don't know. I told the police everything that I recalled at that moment in time.
Okay.
I believe I did tell them about the Bruno Mars thing.
About what?
The Bruno Mars.
I'm sorry,
Email.
what is that?
That's the song that
Oh,
Kimmy
I'm sorry,
sent her.
the song on the email.
Yes.
And you said Bruno Mars?
Mars was the composer of the song that he sent her.
Go ahead, Mr. Morgan.
Okay. And again, that was sometime after December 31st, 2010.
What was?
The email with the Bruno Mars.
No, he sent her that email while she was in Florida. And when we were discussing it, I asked her if she showed that to the police. I asked her if she told the police. And again, she said, I'm afraid for what that would mean for me and my family.
That discussion was after December 31st, right? After she got back from Florida?
Whenever she got back from Florida. Again, I do not recall the date.
Okay. But you recall she was at Florida on her anniversary of December 15th?
To celebrate her anniversary. I don't know if she was there on her anniversary or not. I don't know that.
Are you aware she went to the police on January 4th?
On January 4th?
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So shortly after your discussion, she went to the police department.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's go back and let me ask you about some of the things you have told the police. Yesterday, you testified under direct. Correct me if I'm wrong. Andrea has checked out of this marriage, and that when she talked about Rusty, her eyes went dark, and when she talked about her boss, they sparkled.
Mm-hmm.
Do eyes sparkle? So something out of Harlequin romance novel? I mean, they sparkle? Are mine sparkling?
Your Honor, I'm objecting to the compound questions. I would ask-
I'll bring them up.
Hold on, Mr. Morgan, let me rule on the objection. I know you want to cut me off, but
No.
don't. I'm going to sustain the objection. You can ask a direct question, but don't ask her a compound question. You may answer the question if you can, ma'am.
Do eyes sparkle, Mrs. Attorney?
They certainly glow.
Oh, they do, okay. And they change to dark?
They get cold also is what I said. Mm-hmm.
Now, did you think that was
In my
important
opinion.
enough to
Hold on,
tell?
one second.
I'm sorry, I
You were
didn't.
still talking. Go ahead.
In my opinion, they do. Because you can tell a difference in the way eyes look.
Okay. Did you think that was important to tell Detective Thompson on January 21st, 2010?
Here's what happened.
Yes or no, and then you can explain.
At that exact moment in time, like I said before, no, and here's the reason why. Like I was trying to say earlier, the months after Rusty's murder, I wanted so deeply to believe what Andrea was telling me. I wanted to believe in her. I supported her. And when I was there with her, she started telling me certain things. I had found out about the cruise since we had previously discussed that she had not had sex with her husband in quite some time. I specifically asked her if she and Rusty had had sex on the cruise, and she told me yes. In addition to that, she was telling all of us a lot of different things. I was led to believe,
Just your conversations with Andrea Sneiderman, not what other people told you.
I was led to believe by Andrea Sneiderman that they had patched things up, that things were going well again. After my interview with the police in February, Andrea came out with a public statement about being shocked that it could be Hemi. And I thought to myself, how in the world could she be shocked when I told her to tell the police about her boss? And thinking back, when that public statement came out, I then thought back to all the things that we had talked about at that lunch. And then when it came out that Hemi's wife filed for a divorce because she suspected,
Objection is,
I'm going to sustain that objection.
thank you, Judge.
because she I'm sorry.
Let's stop right. Time out.
I'm sorry.
Stop right there.
I'm sorry.
All right. I believe, at least what I'm hearing, you responded to his last question.
This is all in response to this last question.
Right now, I'm gonna
Okay.
going into other issues right now.
Okay.
Next question.
Okay. You were not present Andrea had the conversation with Detective Thompson and Sergeant Cordellino in her home on the 19th.
That is correct.
Now, you just told us that you did not tell Detective Thompson about the sparkle in the eyes and the dark eyes during that interview, right?
Because at that particular moment in time, I had not thought about it. Again, I did not start recalling that September 1st lunch in detail until after Andrea made her public statement in February.
Well, you told Detective Thompson about the September lunch.
Yes, but I did not go back and yes, I did tell him about that lunch.
You testified on February 23rd, February 24th, 2012, in the Jimenez trial, right?
I did.
And during the course of that trial, you never mentioned anything about the sparkle in the eyes and the dark eyes. Is that correct?
I was not asked. I was only asked a few questions.
Just a few questions. Have you had a chance to review your transcript? You're asked lengthy questions by both sides, right?
Well, not as long as this.
And different lawyers.
Different lawyers in a much different circumstance.
When did you first tell anybody about the sparkle in the eyes and the dark eyes? When did that conversation? When did you?
That night,
Which night?
September 1st, I went immediately to my mother's house after that. That was not in the evening.
Let
And
me rephrase my
No, let her,
Oh.
no.
Okay.
You can answer that question since you asked. Go ahead and finish.
I immediately told my mother that day, and then that night when my husband came home from work.
You told them about the sparkle in the eyes and the dark eyes?
I told them that she had checked out of her marriage. Her demeanor was so cold, and her eyes were so cold, it looked like she had checked out of her marriage. That is what I told them.
So you told them on September the 1st, 2010, you remember that vividly, but you don't bring that up to Detective Thompson on January 21st, do you? And you don't bring it up to this jury on February 20, not this jury, but a jury in this courtroom on February 23rd, do you? It just
There
comes
was a
up this
lot of time in between.
Questions, I think there were 3 questions.
I understand. I'm going to sustain the objection, Mr. Morgan. I'm going to allow you to cross-examine, ask questions. But A, you have to get a witness opportunity to answer a particular question. And that was a compound question. You don't have to respond, but you ask the questions that you want, but individually.
Thank you. You just said you distinctly remember telling your mother and your husband September the 1st, 2010,
That is correct.
that Andrea checked out of her marriage and her cold demeanor.
Mhm.
You did not tell Detective Thompson that on September 21st, 2010, did you?
I didn't speak with him in September.
Excuse me, getting my dates wrong. January 21st, 2011.
Correct.
You did not tell a jury in this
I
courtroom.
told them a lot of things.
I'm asking, did you tell them that specific thing?
That specific thing, it was not something that came to mind at that moment in time, and I do not even recall thinking back to the coldness until she came out with her statement the next month.
I'm sorry. Detective Thompson asked you a lot of questions about
Yes, that's
the
right.
marriage between Andrea and Rusty during that interview.
Mhm.
Not once did you bring this up, did you?
Okay. I brought up a lot of things.
Please answer
Yes.
yes and no.
I suppose not.
And you were asked questions about the marriage between Andrea and Rusty on February 23rd and February 24th, and you never brought this up at that time.
Because I was told that things were getting better.
On February 23rd and 24th, after Rusty had died?
No. After Rusty had died, Andrea told me that they had been getting along, that they had sex on the cruise, and the cruise sort of helped them reconnect.
Now, you told us earlier that Andrea did not discuss her sex life with you.
I asked her, correct, excuse me, please don't twist. What I was talking about at that point was previously to me asking her directly, are you guys having sex? Previous to that conversation, we had never spoken about her sex life to my knowledge. I don't recall ever speaking with her about her and Rusty's sex life until that particular day in my car at GE. I asked her point blank if they were having sex, and she said no. Shayna, it's been a long time since we have had sex. There's too much fighting.
And you discussed your own sex life with her at that time, right?
I did.
Okay.
To some degree.
Now, when was the first time you told anyone in authority, police, district attorney's office, district attorney's investigator, about the checking out of the marriage and the sparkle gone, or the sparkle, or the dark in the eyes? First time.
I did not think it was necessary since Andrea told me she told the police about her boss. I specifically asked her right after she spoke with the police officers if she had told them about her boss. She said yes. I took it at that. My job was done.
Your Honor, that is not responsive to my question.
All right.
I would ask the witness.
It's noted. Next question.
I would ask the question again.
You may.
When was the first time district attorney's lawyer, anyone in authority, about
Is there any redirect?
There will be, Your Honor.
You may.
Well, no, I'm sorry, no redirect, but I would just ask,
redirect?
no redirect.
So, okay, no
Yeah, I'm
additional
sorry.
questions of this
No
witness.
additional questions of this witness.
All right. In that case, may this witness be released and excused from subpoena?
No objection from the state.
Any objection, Mr. Morgan?
we ask that this witness be held on call.
All right. You go ahead and come down and sit down at this point in time that you're still under subpoena, okay? All right, you can leave. Call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. With the court's permission, we would ask permission to publish clip 9-3.
9-3. Ladies and gentlemen, you may look at the various screens and something should appear momentarily. In theory, something should appear. Does this one have a
Yes, Your Honor, I'm poking at it.
the transcript?
How long you known her?
Probably,
I had given these instructions earlier, but since this one's going to have a transcript, ladies and gentlemen, let me give you these reminders. I gave it to you earlier in the week. Ladies and gentlemen, a recording has been admitted in evidence, and there is also a transcript of that recording. It is the recording and not the transcript which constitutes evidence in this trial. You, the jury, must determine for yourselves what was said on the recording. Any discrepancies
since 2000.
recording and the transcript ought to be resolved in favor of the recording, all right? You may proceed at this point in time with whatever you want to play. 9-3.
The third friend you talked about it with was Shayna Citron.
Correct.
Who is Miss Citron?
A good friend.
How long you known her?
Probably since 2003, maybe 2004.
So 7, 8, 9 years, somewhere around.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And Miss Citron lives in Atlanta.
Yes.
And you discussed with her the difficulties you were having working outside the home, correct?
I don't remember the exact things we talked about, but I'm sure that was one of them.
Do you recall talking to Miss Citron about having a hard time juggling getting dinner ready and spending time with the kids?
Yes.
And it was difficult to work 7:30 in the morning to whenever you came home have to come home and get dinner ready, right?
Correct.
And have the kids clinging to your legs and wanting to play and all that, correct?
Correct.
And you have a husband who's home working hard on developing his business, correct?
Correct.
And he's trying to juggle his business side and having to take care of the kids and get them to and from wherever they have to go also, correct?
Correct.
Everybody's stressed.
Yep.
Now, you also talked to your friends about Mr. Newman's feelings for you, correct?
Correct.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would like to publish clip 9-1 from the state's 1B.
This is 9-1.
Correct.
All right. You ready?
Do you remember telling Tammy Parker in late December that you knew who it was that killed Rusty?
Excuse me.
Ma'am, do you need a minute?
I'm fine.
All right, answer the question.
Can you answer the question?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, do you remember telling Tammy Parker in late December 2010 that you knew that it was the defendant who killed Rusty?
Somewhere around the late December time frame, maybe the 27th or 28th of December. I was in Florida. It was to be our 10th wedding anniversary. And we were married in Florida, at a synagogue in Florida, and so I was down there with my family. On the 28th or so of December, I got a weird email from iTunes.
And that's not my question. My question is, do you remember telling Tammy Parker
Yep,
in late
I
December?
told her that I thought it might be Hemi Newman.
Did you in fact tell her that you knew it was Hemi Newman?
In my gut, that's probably what I told her. Yeah. I don't remember the exact conversation, whether I used the word knew or thought.
Okay, let me rephrase the question. Tammy Parker indicates that you told her you knew who killed your husband.
Then I would trust Tammy Parker.
That's it.
Okay.
Then, when did you immediately call police and tell them that it was the defendant?
I started a draft email right after I got this mysterious email from Hemi Newman. He was in Florida at the time.
I'm sorry, who's in Florida, ma'am?
Hemi Newman was in Florida at the time. The same time I was there. For all I knew, he was monitoring my email. Knew exactly where I was. And so when I started the email to Chief Grogan on December 28th, I had a discussion with my parents. What do I do? What do we do? Do I send this? What if he's watching my email? What if he's watching me?
Did your parents not have an email address?
I don't think that crossed my mind.
So because you thought that, you chose not to tell the police at that time?
On that day.
Wasn't it important to you, if you believe you knew who killed Rusty?
I gave the police Hemi Newman's name on November 19th, 2010.
Did you tell them on November 19th, 2010 that you knew for a fact it was Hemi Newman that killed Rusty?
No, it was unfathomable to me. And was unfathomable to me until January 4th when he was arrested that it was Hemi Newman.
But if you told Tammy Parker that you knew who killed him, wouldn't it be important to tell the police?
And didn't Tammy Parker tell you that she thought the whole idea was ludicrous?
I don't care what Tammy Parker said.
Okay. Well, she's a very trusted friend, and so when I explained to her and expressed my gut feeling about that it might be him, and she tells me it's kind of crazy, and Mom's telling me he might come kill you because he's in Florida, and we don't know what's going on, why don't we wait till we get back to Atlanta to tell the police? Up to to that day, the police and I didn't exactly have the best working relationship.
So you believe you know who killed Rusty, and you were going to wait to get back to Atlanta to tell him?
Yep, that's correct. For the protection of myself and my children, I was going to wait till we get back to Atlanta to tell them. That's correct. And so I sat down on January 4th with a list. I had not heard from the police in weeks. And I sat down with a list of follow-ups. Who this? Who that? What happened with this lead? What happened with that lead? Have you talked to this person? Hemi Newman was on my list. I have that notebook.
And that talk you had with them was January 4th?
That's right.
So the period between the end of December when you told Tammy Parker you knew, and January 4th, you did not contact Dunwoody.
That's correct.
And tell them you knew who killed Rusty.
That's correct.
Okay.
Call your next witness.
The state calls Benita Greenberg.
Your Honor, before we begin with the testimony, could we take the video?
Yeah, oh, yes, definitely. If, well, Mr. Pasquale stepped away, would you, I don't know who the new technician is or person is, but could you?
This is a prosecutor office runner. His name's Noah Schneckman. Yes,
Okay, Mr.
yeah,
Well,
thank you.
Noah, if you could, he's removed them. Thank you, Fred, for bringing it to my attention. Please take and spell your name for the record.
Benita Renee Greenberg, B-O-N-I-T-A-R-E-N-E-E-G-R-E-E-N-B-E-R-G.
And Mrs. Greenberg, do you use any other name or go by any other name other than the first name you just identified yourself as?
Bonnie.
Do most people call you Bonnie?
Yes.
Mrs. Greenberg, can you tell me what your relationship was to Rusty Sneiderman?
He was my son-in-law.
And what is your relationship to the defendant, Andrea Sneiderman?
She's my daughter.
Do you have any other children?
I have a son,
Okay, what's your son's name?
Todd Greenberg,
Is Todd older or younger than Andrea?
older,
And in what area does Todd and his family live?
Roosevelt.
Who is currently living with you?
Our daughter and our grandchildren, Sophia and Ian.
Okay. When you say your daughter, do you have any daughter other than the defendant?
No.
Okay, so you're living with the defendant. Who else?
Our grandchildren and my husband,
And your husband. What's your husband's name?
Herb Greenberg.
Mrs. Greenberg, can you tell me, I want to direct your attention to the summer of 2010. Can you tell me what your relationship with your daughter, Andrea, was like in the summer of 2010?
I don't, what my relationship was in the
Did you have
summer.
a close relationship with your daughter?
Very,
How often would you speak with her?
almost daily.
And in what form did your daily contact take place? Did you see her? Did you talk to her on the phone?
Both.
Both? Where were you living at that time?
We were living in Roswell,
And where was Andrea living at that time?
in Dunwoody.
Do you know when the defendant started work with GE?
I believe it was March or April
Of what year?
2010.
Was that something that she had discussed with you prior to taking that job?
Yes.
Can you describe how your daughter felt about taking that job?
She was excited about the opportunity to go back to work. She had some concerns about how child care and her responsibilities at home would work out.
How old were Sophia and Ian at that time? Do you recall?
almost 5 and almost in a year and a half.
Okay, and at that time they
4.5 and a year and a half.
Okay. And what was Rusty doing for employment at that time? Do you recall?
He was working at home.
And what was he doing while working out of the home?
He was trying to establish businesses and taking care of the children.
Okay. Did your daughter ever tell you about who her immediate boss was at GE?
Yes.
Okay, and who did she tell you that person was?
Hemi Newman.
Did she describe him by name? Did she tell you the name?
When?
At what point did she tell you her immediate boss's name?
I don't recall.
Do you recall if it was early on in her employment there?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have any conversations with Andrea about her boss, Hemi Newman?
Yes.
How many times did you and Andrea talk about Hemi Newman?
Numerous times.
And what sorts of things did she tell you about him?
Initially, she said that he was extremely helpful because of the area that she, or the type of job that she was working in was new, and she had never worked with that kind of information before, but she was excited about learning.
Did she describe her interaction with him as positive initially?
Yes.
What, if anything, did she tell you about the travel that was required once she started work at GE?
I think she was initially told that there wouldn't be that much travel.
Did that turn out to be the case?
No.
Okay, did you have conversations about that?
Yes.
Can you describe some of the conversations you and Andrea had about the amount of travel she ended up doing for GE?
She thought it was a lot of travel, more than she was told she was going to have to do.
What, if any, kind of repercussions, or what did the amount of travel Andrea was doing, did that have an effect on her family?
I think it put some added stress on family obligations.
You said that you and your husband at that time were living in Roswell?
Yes.
Were you able to assist when Andrea's travel schedule complicated the family routine?
If we were asked, we always assisted.
You were always willing to do that?
Of course.
What, if anything, did Andrea tell you about traveling with her boss, Hemi Newman?
She wondered why there were so many trips that he accompanied her on.
So you knew then that she was traveling with Mr. Newman?
Yes, he gave her the impression that it would be good for him to be able to introduce her to various people that she may have spoken to over the phone or through text or emails.
Okay, that was what she communicated to you.
Mm-hmm.
And, okay. What, if anything, did she tell you about the defendant, or are you aware that Andrea went to Longmont, Colorado at some point during her employment with General Electric?
Yes,
Were you aware of it at the time that she went?
yes.
Do you recall when it was that she went to Longmont, Colorado?
I don't recall the exact date, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Can you limit it? Was it in the summer months? Was it in the fall months? Do you recall?
I'm quite sure it was in the summer.
In the summer? Okay. What, if anything, did she tell you about Hemi Newman going on that trip with her?
I don't remember if it was that particular trip, but at some point in time, Andrea and I talked about Mr. Newman saying to Andrea that he liked her.
And Andrea was telling you about this incident?
Yes.
Okay. And what else did she tell you about? Did she give you any specifics about what had occurred?
I was confused. She said, he likes me. And I said, that's great.
Why did you say that was great?
Well, she had just started working. She obviously was doing a good job, and he liked her. And she said, no, Mom, you don't understand. He really likes me. I said, that's not so great.
And what did she say when you said that?
I don't remember. I said, maybe you, I responded that maybe you need to go to HR.
And how did Andrea respond when you suggested she go to HR? And when you say HR, what are you referring to?
Human Resources Department.
Okay, and that would be a division of General Electric that would deal with employment issues?
I suppose.
You assumed. Okay. And what did Andrea say when you suggested that she take the situation she was describing to you to HR?
She said, Mom, I really think I can handle it.
Did she say anything else that you remember?
Not at that time.
Okay.
Yeah, well, excuse me.
Okay.
I believe she did. She said, when I suggested she go to HR, she said to me, if I do that, I could lose my job, and I can't afford to do that.
When she says she can't afford to do that, do you have any familiarity with the financial situation in Andrea and Rusty's household?
I knew that Rusty wasn't working. He didn't have an income at that time, so they were relying on Andrea's income.
Do you know, or did you believe at the time that they were having financial difficulties?
I don't believe they were having difficulties, but I knew that they needed her money.
That's what Andrea told you?
No, I think that's what both Rusty and Andrea conveyed.
Do you have any sense of what their financial condition actually was? I mean, would you have access to bank accounts, anything like that?
No.
Okay, you're just basing your impression on what you were told?
Correct.
Did you have any other conversations with Andrea about her boss, Hemi Newman, and any inappropriateness between them?
No.
Did you have any conversation with Andrea, or what, if any, conversation did you have about Hemi Newman making any advances towards her?
I think that she continued to have some difficulty.
Do you remember anything specific that she told you about it?
We talked about it over the summer. I asked her how things were going. She said, I'm keeping my distance. She asked some
Hear that
people.
phone, Mr. Deputy? I'm sorry for the interruption, Counselor. Could you seize that phone? Sorry, we try to maintain a little bit better decorum in the courtroom. You may continue. Sorry for the interruption.
You were telling me about any other conversations you had with Andrea about Hemi Newman's advances towards her and what she was doing in response.
I believe she talked with friends and asked them what she should do.
Do you know that because she told you that, or do you know that because you learned that later?
No, she told me that.
She told you at the time? Okay, so you knew she was speaking about it with you, and you knew that she was speaking about it with other friends of hers?
She asked for advice on what she should do or how she should handle the situation.
Up until the time that Rusty was killed, do you have any memory of any other conversations you had with Andrea on this subject?
No.
What, if anything, did Andrea tell you about Hemi Newman joining her in Longmont, Colorado in July 2010?
She didn't.
What, if anything, did Andrea tell you about holding hands with Hemi Newman?
She did not.
What, if anything, did Andrea tell you about dancing with Mr. Newman in Greenville, South Carolina?
She did not.
What, if anything, did she tell you about kissing Hemi Newman?
She did not.
Did she ever mention anything to you about having adjoining rooms when they traveled?
Yes.
She mentioned that to you?
Mm-hmm.
What did you think of that?
It didn't strike me. I didn't think anything of it at the time.
Do you recall the context that it came up, that Andrea and Mr. Newman had adjoining rooms when they
No.
traveled? You just remember the fact of it? Before Rusty's murder, what, if anything, did Andrea tell you about being afraid of Hemi Newman?
She wasn't afraid.
She didn't seem afraid to you? Based on anything she told you, did you have concerns about her safety around Mr. Newman?
No.
In between the time that Rusty was murdered and the time that Hemi Newman was arrested, what, if anything, did Andrea tell you about being afraid of Hemi Newman?
He was her friend.
That's what you understood the relationship to be,
Absolutely.
right up until the day he was arrested?
Up until the time that she received an email when we were in Florida.
Okay. I'm going to ask you some specific questions about that, but before I do, I want to be specific. What, if anything, in the days after Rusty's murder, did Andrea tell you about suspecting Hemi being responsible?
It was unfathomable that her boss could murder her husband.
It wasn't something you all talked about?
That Hemi, Mr. Newman, would have murdered Rusty was unfathomable.
It didn't occur to you at all?
Why would her boss murder her husband?
And based upon what you knew, what Andrea told you, did you have any reason to believe that he would?
No.
Did you have any reason to think that Mr. Newman had a motive to murder Rusty?
No.
If you had known, what would you have done with that information?
If I had known,
If you had known that Hemi Newman had a motive to murder Rusty, what would you have done with that information?
Yeah, I'm going to object as to what she would have done. What she would have done is irrelevant to this proceeding.
Why is this relevant, Ms. Cross? What she would have done.
I'll move on now.
All right, I sustain that objection.
Prior to the time that Rusty died, had you and Andrea ever talked about her getting a divorce?
Absolutely not.
Had it ever come up at all?
Never.
I asked you specifically about Andrea divorcing Rusty. In the months leading up to Rusty's murder, had you and Andrea ever talked about the topic of divorce in general?
No.
No. Did you observe anything between Andrea and Rusty that made you think that that was something that was a possibility?
Absolutely not.
In December of 2010, did you travel to Florida?
Yes.
Okay. And how long after Rusty's murder on November 18th, 2010, did you travel to Florida?
Once our granddaughter was finished with school, it was vacation.
Sophia was in what?
Holiday vacation.
Holiday vacation? Do you remember the specific dates?
I do not remember whenever school let out, we left soon after.
Okay. And who traveled with you?
My husband, our daughter Andrea, and our 2 grandchildren.
You talk about Sophia and Ian, Andrew's children.
Yes.
At the time you went to Florida, had anybody been arrested for Rusty's murder?
No.
To your knowledge, at the time you went to Florida, was there a primary suspect in Rusty's murder?
No.
Did you suspect anyone at that time?
Prior to going to
You
Florida?
traveled to Florida.
No.
Do you know, or did Andrea communicate to you if she suspected anyone at that time?
No.
Did you have conversations with Andrea about the investigation?
Yes.
Did you have conversations with Andrea about her cooperation with the police?
Absolutely.
To your knowledge, had Andrea communicated with the police about her relationship with Mr. Newman?
Yes.
And to the best of your knowledge, what she told them was consistent with what she told you?
Yes.
So tell me then, what, if any, communication do you know about between Andrea and Hemi Newman after Rusty's murder?
We were in Florida. Andrea received an email from Hemi Newman.
Prior to receiving that email from Hemi Newman, do you know if there was any contact between Andrea and Hemi Newman after Rusty's murder?
I do not believe there was any contact.
You don't know anything, or the defendant didn't tell you anything about a late-night phone call on November 19th, 2010?
Yes, she did.
She did tell you that? What did she tell you about that?
She said that she called Mr. Newman to let him know that she told the police. She gave the police his name.
You were present for the interview with Andrea and the police on November 19th, 2010. Is that right?
I was
Okay, where did that interview take place?
in Andrea's home in Dunwoody.
Were you there the entire time?
Yes.
Who else was there?
My husband, our son, 2 police officers, and the Sneidermans.
When you say the Sneidermans, who are you referring to?
Donald and Marilyn Sneiderman, Rusty's parents.
Okay. And so if you were present through the entirety of the November 19th interview, are you aware that the police asked Andrea and Andrea provided information about many people during that interview?
Yes.
Do you know if Andrea called any of the other people that were mentioned during that interview?
I do not.
When was it that Andrea told you that she called Mr. Newman to alert him that she had provided his name to the police?
I don't recall. It was either she said before she made the phone call or after.
Okay. Close in time to when the call was made, to your understanding?
Yes?
Were you present when the call was made?
No.
Did you overhear any of it?
No.
Outside that phone call on November 19th, 2010, you were telling me about the next communication you knew of between Andrea and Mr. Newman. When was that?
I believe it was the 28th of December.
And tell me about the communication, Mr. Newman.
Mr. Newman emailed Andrea.
How do you know that he emailed Andrea?
We were sitting in our living room, dining room area, and Andrea was going through her emails, and she said, there's an email from Hemi Newman here.
What else did she say?
She read it to us.
Do you remember the content of it?
I do not remember the entire content, but it said something like, I still care for you, ... I didn't, ... And then there was a reference to an iTunes song.
Do you remember any particulars about the reference to the iTunes song? Like what the song was, or the artist, or anything like that?
Stay the way you are, just the way you are. I don't know.
It wasn't familiar to you at the time, or?
No.
Did it?
I don't listen to a lot of current music, so I don't know.
It didn't occur at all. What was the conversation, or what can you tell me about what Andrea told you after she showed you the email?
Andrea wanted to notify the police, and I was very concerned for her safety.
Why were you very concerned for her safety?
I'd been concerned for the safety of Andrea, our grandchildren, and us from the day that Rusty was murdered.
But you just said, if I recall, that there wasn't anything that you suspected about Mr. Newman prior to that time. Is that right?
That is correct.
You didn't have any discussions about being concerned about Mr. Newman in particular. Is that right?
That is correct, until she received that email.
What was it about that email that caused you concern?
There was just something about it that made me uncomfortable.
What was Andrea's reaction to it?
She wanted to notify the police, and my response was, I'm concerned for your safety. What if Mr. Newman has access to your computer? What if he knows where we are?
Mrs. Greenberg, what made you think that Mr. Newman would have access to your computer?
To Andrea's computer?
To Andrea's
I don't know enough about technology. I don't know whether I'm understanding that people can get into other people's computers many different ways. I was concerned for her safety.
What made you think that Mr. Newman would have access to Andrea's phone?
Phone?
Did you just express a moment ago you were concerned that Mr. Newman was monitoring Andrea's whereabouts?
No.
You weren't concerned about that?
That isn't what I said.
What did you say?
What I said was, I'm concerned that he may know where we are.
What caused you to be concerned about Mr. Newman knowing where you were?
Andrea shared with us that friends of hers had texted or emailed that Mr. Newman was in Florida.
At that time, did Andrea say anything about being afraid of Hemi Newman?
She did not say she was afraid of him, no.
Mrs. Greenberg, do you recall giving a sworn deposition in a related matter?
I do.
And do you recall the date of that deposition?
I do not.
Does November 16th, 2012 sound familiar to you?
I don't recall the date.
Okay. You were sworn at that deposition, is that correct?
Yes.
And you answered questions related to the testimony, or similar to the testimony that you're giving this morning, is that right?
Yes.
Do you recall being asked at that time about the email that Andrea received on December 28th, 2010?
I do.
Do you recall being asked if Andrea had described or if she had told you what the content of that email was?
I do not recall my response.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Ms. Greenberg, I'm going to direct your attention to a transcript. I'm going to ask that you read beginning on line 22, and for the record it's page 111, and continue on through line 5 of the following page. And when you've done that, can you let me know that, please?
Finish reading, just look up.
Yes.
You ready?
Thank you, Your Honor. Do you remember now being asked if Andrea had described the content of the December 28, 2010 email to you?
Yes.
And what was your testimony at that time? Then?
What was the question again?
I asked you what your response was when you were asked under oath if Andrea had described the content of the December 28, 2010 email from Henry Newman to you. What did you respond?
I believe I responded no.
But your testimony today is that you do have a recollection of it.
Absolutely.
And at the time you gave a sworn deposition in November of 2012, you didn't have a recollection of it.
I did not have a recollection at that time.
Okay.
I believe I was being questioned for over 3 hours. I was exhausted. I never had an opportunity to review what I said. I was sitting in a room at a table with 2 people, one who knew my daughter.
Let me stop you. Let me stop you there.
Well, I'm going to let her explain her answer. Go ahead.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One who knew my daughter for over 15 years as her brother-in-law, knew how much she loved him.
At this point in time, Mrs. Greenberg, I hate to cut you off, but I'm going to let you explain your answer, but at this point, you're going into some other issues. Next question.
I simply wanted to explain that I was intimidated.
Well, I understand that. But at this point, next question.
Okay. You felt intimidated when you gave that deposition?
Yes, I did.
All right. What's your educational background, Mrs. Greenberg? What's your educational background? You have a PhD, don't you?
I do.
Do you consider yourself to be an educated person?
I do.
What was your profession prior to your retirement?
I was a university professor.
Okay.
What did you teach?
Communication disorders, speech pathology.
She's with me.
Thank you, Your Honor. Did you have concerns? You testified about your concerns as a result of the email. Did you have concerns about your email being compromised in some way?
My email?
Your email. Do you have an email address?
I do.
Did you in November and December of 2010?
I did.
If you had concerns as a result of Mr. Newman's email to Andrea, why didn't you communicate with the police about your concerns?
I felt that we were in Florida for one purpose, and I knew that Andrea would go to the police as soon as we returned home and talk with them about this.
How serious would you say your concerns were as a result of the email?
Something didn't sound right. That's all I knew.
And you didn't immediately report the information or your suspicions to the police?
I had no idea what it was that I was concerned about. There was a feeling that I had that something was wrong, but I didn't know what it was.
Did you have any evidence that Mr. Newman was monitoring Andrea's whereabouts?
Well, it seemed strange that if we were in Florida and we had told no one we were going, that he too wound up in Florida.
Florida's a big state, isn't it?
Yes?
Were you aware at the time that Mr. Newman had family in Florida?
No.
Did you have anything other than the fact of the email as you described it to the jury today to make you concerned about Mr. Newman at that point?
The friends that told Andrea that Mr. Newman was in Florida, I believe told her where he was.
And where was he, to your recollection?
In Boca Raton.
And where were you?
In West Palm Beach.
So your answer is, outside the fact of the email, that Mr. Newman's presence in the same state caused you concern?
It made me uncomfortable.
At that time that you became uncomfortable, did you have any specific idea or suspicions about why Mr. Newman would murder Rusty?
Absolutely not.
Because you didn't have any information to that point that Mr. Newman had a motive, is that right?
That's correct.
I want to direct your attention, well, before I move on. When did you return from Florida?
Over New Year's weekend.
Okay, and that's 2010 going into 2011?
Correct.
And who returned with you?
Our daughter Andrea and our two grandchildren, my husband.
And your husband. When you say "our," you mean your husband?
Yes.
Upon your return over New Year's weekend, end of December, beginning of January 2011, did you go to the police with your suspicions?
Could we go back a moment?
You may.
No.
If you need to answer a question, you may, go back. If you need to answer an earlier question, go ahead. To explain something.
I'd like to explain why we were in Florida.
Well, I don't know if she didn't ask that question. So you can't answer a question that wasn't asked.
All right. Or why I knew that Andrea could go to the police. We had one purpose in being there, and that was to be there for December 30th.
Mr. Goldberg, 1 second. I will allow you, if you need to go back to address the question that she had asked, I will allow you to do that, but
okay.
You have to respond to her questions, okay? You may continue.
Thank you.
Ms. Cross.
When you returned to Atlanta, did you immediately go to the police with your suspicions?
No, Andrea did.
At that time, had an arrest been made?
No.
To your knowledge, was there a suspect?
No.
How many days after you got back from Florida did Andrea go to the police?
I don't remember the exact date, 2 days.
You think it was about 2 days?
yes.
Could it have been as many as 4?
I don't know.
Okay. Did you yourself go to the police?
I did not.
Why not?
My husband went.
Your husband went with Andrea?
Yes,
When she went to the police?
yes.
And it was it your understanding that Andrea was going to tell them about the email?
Absolutely.
And was it your understanding that Andrea was going to tell them about your family's suspicions about Mr. Newman?
There were no family suspicions.
You were suspicious, weren't you?
No, I was concerned.
Thank you. Was it your understanding that Andrea was going to tell the police about your family's concerns about Mr. Newman?
Yes,
Specifically the email?
I believe so.
Mrs. Greenberg, I want to direct your attention to November 18th, 2010. How did you learn that something had happened to us?
Our daughter Andrea called my husband.
Let me see, were you on the phone when she called him the first time?
No, I was in bed.
Okay. Were you, without telling me what anybody else said, were you able to hear your husband's part of the conversation?
No,
Okay. Did there come a time when, without telling me what he said, your husband came and told you something that Andrea had relayed to him?
yes.
Okay, and then what did you do as a result of that?
I put some clothes on and got into the car.
Where were you going?
Dunwoody Prep.
Okay, at that time, did you know what happened to Rusty?
I knew that something had happened to Rusty.
Did you know specifically what had happened to Rusty?
No,
Did you know he had been shot at that time?
no.
All right. Who got into the car with him?
My husband?
Anybody else?
No.
How long of a drive is it from your home? Were you living in Roswell at that time?
We were.
Okay, how long of a drive is it from Roswell to, where were you going?
Dunwoody Prep?
Dunwoody Prep. Did you know Dunwoody Prep?
Yes.
Okay, and you knew the location as what?
I beg your
How were you familiar with it?
We'd been there numerous times because it was where our children had gone to preschool.
Okay.
Our grandchildren had gone to preschool.
Okay. And how long of a drive was it from your home to Dunwoody Prep?
Under normal conditions or that day?
Both.
Probably 20 minutes normally. I think we were there in much less time.
Do you know what time Andrea called you? Or called your husband?
9:15.
And what time did you arrive at the daycare?
Somewhere around 9:30.
What, if anything, were you doing in the car ride on the way there?
I was on the phone with our daughter.
Can you describe to the jurors what her demeanor was?
She was hysterical.
What was she telling you?
Something's happened to Rusty. Nobody will tell me what. I can't get there fast enough. Something's happened to Rusty.
What was your understanding of what Andrea was doing at the time she was talking to you?
She was driving her car
From where to where?
from her place of employment to Dunwoody Prep.
Do you know where her place of employment was?
I don't
Okay. You'd
exactly.
never been there?
No, I'd not.
Okay. Who got to the daycare first, you or Andrea?
We were on the phone together. I talked her through the entire trip there.
What was your demeanor like?
I was trying to stay as calm as I could so that I could keep her calm.
Was she calm?
She was hysterical. I continued to talk her through and I said, listen to me. I don't want you to have an accident. You have to continue to talk to me.
Your concerns were for her safety as she was driving?
Absolutely.
Okay. Who got to the daycare first, you or Andrea?
She got there just minutes before we did because I kept talking to her until she pulled into the Dunwoody Prep area. She started screaming. She said, "There's crime tape all around. I don't know what's happened. I don't know what's happened." And I kept saying, "Stay calm." And our communication ended.
At the time your communication ended, had you arrived yet at the daycare?
I could hear Andrea screaming because her phone was in her car, and we had just about pulled up.
At that time, at the time that your phone communication with Andrea stopped, did you know that Rusty had been shot?
No.
Did Andrea say anything to you that indicated Rusty had been shot?
No.
How long were you at the daycare?
Possibly 15 minutes total,
Did you find Andrea there?
eventually. We were told to go home.
Don't tell me what anybody else told you yet. Okay? Please don't tell me. I'll ask you where you went and why. Please don't tell me what anybody told you. I'm going to ask you during the time that you were at Dunwoody Prep, how and when did you find Andrea?
We left the scene of the crime and drove around to the back of Dunwoody Prep looking for our daughter.
You didn't see her when you arrived and got out of the car?
No.
Okay. What did you see?
Crime scene tape.
What else?
Helicopters flying all over.
What else?
Rusty's car.
Was there any ambulance there?
No.
Did you see Rusty there?
No.
You were telling me you drove your car around to the back. Is that where you found Andrea?
Yes.
And how long can you estimate for me you were at the daycare before you found Andrea?
Five minutes, 8 minutes.
Did you go in the daycare?
No.
Did someone bring Andrea out to you?
Andrea was out behind Dunwoody Prep near the dumpsters.
When you pulled up, she was already there?
When we went to find her,
Were you in the car or out of the car when you first saw her?
we were in the car.
Okay. And what did you do when you were in the car and you saw Andrea?
Stopped the car. I got out and went to our daughter.
Was she standing alone?
No, she was in the arms of someone else.
Do you know who that person was?
I'm not sure who that person was.
Was it a male or a female?
Female.
Was it someone who was dressed in a police uniform or not?
No, it was someone, I believe, associated with Dunwoody Prep.
Okay, it appeared to be someone who might have worked there.
Correct.
Okay. What did Andrea say to you at the time?
Andrea was hysterical. Between crying and then not crying and being comatose, she said very little.
I'm going to separate there. You said the word comatose. Did you mean literally comatose or did you mean shocked?
Shocked.
Okay. So when you encountered your daughter and she was in the condition that you described, what, if anything, did you do next?
I took her in my arms, put her in the car, and we drove back to her home.
All right. At that time that you took her in your arms, that you put her in the car and you drove home, when you say home, do you mean Andrea's home?
Yes.
Because it was very nearby?
Yes.
Did you know that Rusty had been shot?
I knew something very terrible had happened to Rusty.
Had any police officer at that time told you that Rusty had been shot?
No.
Did any civilian at that point tell you that Rusty had been shot?
No.
Did Andrea tell you at that point that Rusty had been shot?
I don't believe she was capable of telling us anything.
That's no, she did not?
I don't think she said anything.
Thank you. You said you got back in the car and you went to the house. Who was in the car with you?
My husband, our daughter, and I believe our son.
That's your son, Todd?
Yes.
Do you know how it was that Todd arrived at the daycare? You mentioned that you and your husband were alone in the car. How did Todd get there?
He arrived shortly, almost at the same time that we did.
Had you seen him before you pulled around to the back, as you described, to get Andrea by the back of the daycare?
Yes.
He was with you at that time?
Yes.
When you pulled around the back of the daycare to get Andrea, was Todd in the car with you and your husband?
Yes.
Where was his car? Do you know?
Somewhere near the crime scene.
So, as I understand it, now the four of you are in the car.
Yes.
And you're going to Andrea's house, is that right?
Yes.
Where were you seated in the car?
I was in the back holding Andrea.
Andrea was in the back with you?
Yes.
Who was driving?
My husband.
Was he driving his car or your car? Or
Yes.
his car? Was there any discussion in the car on the way to Andrea's house?
We were all in shock. We didn't know what happened.
Were you frustrated that you didn't know what happened?
Absolutely.
Would you have expected? Strike that. You wanted to tell me earlier, tell me now, why was it that you were going to Andrea's home?
When we arrived at the crime scene, we were told, we identified ourselves.
As whom?
Andrea's parents, and that Rusty was our son-in-law.
Okay.
Someone told me, or asked me, I understand you live nearby. You should go home. I looked at him and said, we just came from home. Where is our son-in-law? What has happened to our son-in-law? And where is our daughter?
You're describing this conversation. Were you speaking with someone who was dressed as a police officer, or were you speaking to someone who was in plain clothes? Do you recall?
I recall it was Sergeant Cordellino.
Okay, you now know it was Sergeant Cordellino. Did you know him at the time?
No.
Okay. And who, if you know, is Sergeant Cordellino employed by?
The Dunwoody Police Department?
The Dunwoody Police Department. All right, so it's your testimony that a representative of the Dunwoody Police Department told you to go home. Is that right?
Yes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this will be a good pause location at this point in time. We will resume after this break. When I give you this break, ladies and gentlemen, just have a seat for a minute, ladies and gentlemen, in my jury box, that is. If you want to stand and stretch, as long as you can, but do not discuss the case. I'll allow anyone to discuss the case with you. Do not remain upon the floor when I release you at this point in time. I know one of the jurors had communicated they had to do something. This is your opportunity to do what you brought to my attention yesterday. Do not read or look at any media coverage pertaining to this case. Do not go upon the internet and do any research about this case. Do not blog about this case while it's ongoing. Do not go to any location that may have been made reference to. All the evidence must come to you in the form of sworn testimony from the witness stand and anything that's introduced during the course of the trial. You're more than welcome to bring something to snack and or eat with you during the afternoon session. Do not consume any alcoholic beverages during this lunch break. Deputy Garrett is going to turn back over to you your cell phone, and your communication devices. However, do not text about this case, do not email about this case, do not receive any telephonic messages about this case while it's ongoing. As I mentioned earlier, the lawyers and the parties cannot talk or interact with you. I don't ever want you to think they're being rude or discourteous. As I have mentioned to you several times, if you do decide to have a meal here in the Decatur area, you're more than welcome, but do not sit next to anyone who may be discussing this case or allow anyone to sit next to you who may be discussing the case. You have two options, either move away from them or tell them to move away from you, but do not engage in any conversations with anyone about this case while it's ongoing. I need you to maintain an open mind at this point in time. Now, we're going to be on break until 1:30. I need each and every one of you to be present and accounted for there in the jury room at 1:30 so we can resume. Deputy Garrett, we're on recess till 1:30. All right.
All right, 11 Alive's continuing coverage of the trial of Andrea Sneiderman. We thank you for being with us today. It's lunchtime, 90-minute break. I'm Jeff Hellinger, along with Kelly Burke, who is the former district attorney of Houston County. We have had the occasion to listen to Shana Citron, former friend of Andrea Sneiderman today, and we have heard from Bonnie Greenberg, who has been on